everyone, and welcome to China EVs and More, where my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discuss today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. If you enjoy this room, please help us get the word out to other enthusiasts. And of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Lei. I am the managing director at Sino Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Lei, good afternoon. It's rainy here. Can you please introduce yourself?
Good afternoon to a busy Tu.
Oh my goodness.
Likewise, it's raining here. This is Lei Xing, your co-host, former chief editor of China Auto Review, and this is episode number 103. Our lives have been inundated with balloons and chat GPTs. I think the last week or so, or a few days or so, Bard, Ernie, Bing, Microsoft, Google, all of that. So
it's absolutely crazy. Well, the Chinese companies too, right? It's not just in the US.
Yeah, Baidu, right? And our good friend Tony has to debunk some rumors. But let's get back to China EVs and more, and particularly the more part. It seems always whenever we do these live episodes, we do it on a special day. And today is special because of the Hesai IPO.
Yes.
So I think it's fair we start there. I mean, we've been talking about it for some time. We've been talking about LiDARs. Our Max episode with Innovusion CEO should be dropping soon.
Tomorrow.
So perfect timing, I think, because this is huge. Not in terms of LiDAR, but in terms of this is the first, well, not the first, but I think in the last 18 months, probably the biggest, let's say the biggest IPO of a Chinese company in the US.
This is the thaw because the capital markets were frozen for Chinese companies because of the PCAOB accounting stuff. Yep. And this is the first, and you know, Hesai raised $190 million, I think, right? So very significant for them.
Yeah, I think they planned this timing very well because PCAOB, they've just finished their
audit
investigation or audit in Hong Kong of you know all of these companies, and it looks like these delisting fears have subsided, and you know Hesai being what in China they're called the number one Chinese LiDAR stock, or the first Chinese LiDAR stock, right? We have Septime interviews. These people we've already talked to, right? They're all listed. Luminar, I'm hoping we get a chance. They're a U.S. listed company, but this is the first U.S. listed Chinese LiDAR company, and I have a sense that it won't be the last now that things are kind of opening.
And it's important to note that Chinese companies want to enter the U.S. capital markets because that's where most liquidity happens, right?
Exactly.
And that indicates that they really want to lean into the U.S. market because it allows them to trade in the USD, right? So, and not have to change from Hong Kong dollar to USD or RMB to USD. So I think that's really important to note.
Yeah, and some of the numbers that they shared, so this is from their official website. They're number one in 2022 global LiDAR shipments, so over 60,000. So cumulatively from 2017 to the end of 2022, over 100,000 LiDARs shipped since they started the company was started in 2014. And they have 60% of the autonomous mobility global market share. And they're number one in ADAS design wins globally. These are third-party numbers, but I think they have over 10 OEM wins, so including companies we often talk about on the show. Li Auto, we'll get to it. Jidu, okay, SAIC, Chang'an, they just got a win. Remember a few episodes ago with SAIC's Feifan, Rising Auto, which is also supplied by Luminar. Chang'an Auto, Geely, right, Lotus, and together that's over 1 million units in perspective, LiDAR supplies, and they're expecting their annual deliveries to be over 1 million units in 2025, which, by the way, seems to be a consensus now that I talked to Valio, I talked to Innovution, and they have the consensus that within 3 years, global shipments will be over 1 million. And Hesai alone, they want to do 1 million in 2025. So just some of the numbers.
Yeah, I think that we're going to see the LiDAR space spotlighted in 2023, but also the competition heat up between all of these seemingly viable companies: Septon, Luminar, Innovution, RoboSense, and Hesai, of course. Most of them obviously are Chinese or have major operations in China. Luminar is actually trying to enter and become partners with some of the Chinese EV companies. And so I think this is good. Hopefully there's less friction when it comes to this stuff, but you never know, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there could be another. Anyways, I digress.
Yeah, and also interesting that I'm reading that Hesai's revenues exceeds the combined revenues of Velodyne, Ouster, Luminar, and Innovitz. Yeah, and so I guess they're the most promising in terms of becoming profitable. So that, again, with the IPO, I don't know, I think this $19, right? I think they closed at $21.
Yeah.
Valuation is about $2.4 billion.
That's a monster number.
Yeah, and I think that their founders, we talked about this a little bit earlier, are as interesting as the company itself. So there are three co-founders. They were either schoolmates at Tsinghua University or Stanford, and all of them have mechanical engineering degrees.
Tsinghua is basically China's MIT.
Yeah, and they're in their late 30s, so they're still very young. And then one very important person in all of this is their CFO. And guess who their CFO is?
Who's this?
Louise Xie. Does that ring a bell?
It rings a bell, but I don't know. I don't know why.
NIO.
Oh.
He was the CFO of NIO during 2017 to 2019.
Right.
So he basically helped NIO IPO. And he also was the president and CFO of New Oriental.
Right.
Which is also listed in the US.
But took a beating.
I think he's a very important person in all of this, especially in this climate, right? And then look at their investors, their shareholders: Xiaomi, Meituan, Bosch, Baidu, Hill House, Lightspeed, all of these, right, institutions.
Yeah, like premium.
Yeah.
So they set themselves up because with the experience he had as a CFO, the relationships he had with the banks, the stock exchanges, I mean, it made for a smooth IPO, right?
I guess the pieces were put together, at the right time, in the right place, I guess. So,
and a lot of that valuation is because they're shipping product, right? Because
right,
the Innovizes and stuff like that, they're still not shipping commercial, or they're not shipping production product yet.
Right, and if you look at the robotaxis, right, more often than not, you probably will find a robotaxi with a Hesai LiDAR on it. I'm talking about American robotaxi companies.
So anecdotally, in 2019, I've told this story in a previous podcast. I went down and visited WeRide in Guangzhou, and they all kind of look alike. And then you get closer, I assumed it was going to be a Velodyne and how fast the mighty fall, right? Because before 2018, 2019, everything was kind of Velodyne, right? But Li Zhang, who is the COO, said that they were swapping out all the Velodyne to move to Hesai. So Hesai is actually an OG, is one of the OGs. So
yeah, so when Hesai was founded in 2014, let's say 2014, 2015-ish, that was when Google had the Firefly, that little pod, right?
Yep.
And back then, the LiDAR, in the industry, there was a saying that it was a $75,000 question. And now it's probably a $750 question. So that's how far we've come. And it's, the one word that we'll keep repeating is this democratization of this sensor.
And a brief history lesson. DARPA, the Grand Challenge, year number one, no one won. It was the Autonomous Vehicle Challenge. It was in 2007, I think it started. And Carnegie Mellon went the farthest, but they did not finish. The second year, the winner was Stanford and Sebastian Thrun. He and his team thought of the LiDAR to help navigate the autonomous vehicle. And so that helped them win year two. And so you can take roots of the LiDAR and Velodyne actually back to the Grand Challenge and the DARPA competition for autonomous vehicles in the late 2000s, 2007, 2008. So,
yeah. And one other interesting point out is Bosch is being as an investor, but Bosch is coming out with their own LiDARs.
Yeah. Frenemies.
So this is an interesting dynamic.
They're probably using the money that they made off the Hesai IPO to fund their investment and research in their own LiDAR.
Yeah, I think, companies like Bosch and Mobileye, that they're either at their A sample or B sample stage, but right, they're frenemies, basically.
And that's going to happen. There's going to be companies at the tier one level that want to move into the CM or OEM level and vice versa. I think what we'll see is where they see TAMs, total addressable markets, the largest total addressable market, we'll see these tier ones, tier twos kind of evolve their technology, their research and development, their investment in new technologies as these EVs emerge in the United States as well, right? Because we know from a fundamental standpoint what types of technologies, chips, clouds, batteries, but specific technologies, we are still kind of evolving as well, right? So
yeah,
there's plenty of opportunities for the tier ones to become major players in this pivot to electric vehicles. So
the co-founder David Ifan Lee, he said at the NASDAQ this morning, he said, it's very jokingly, all of our investors, thank you for believing us, founding us, and being extremely supportive from the passenger seat, not the driver's seat, and not trying to grab the wheels. I thought that was interesting. And then the other thing he said was about these machines being dumb, that they're just executing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, what we're trying to do is to help them, make decisions. Right? It might be cheesy, but that's what they're trying to do.
What Hesai is likely going to do with a lot of that money is probably subsidize the cost of these LiDAR in order to gain share and push other players out.
I mean, yeah, look at Li Auto. If their plan is to do 300,000, 350,000 units, that's the number of LiDARs, basically.
Yeah. and again, these are in production on vehicles.
Yes.
So
yes.
That is a huge, huge milestone. Not as significant as getting to job one if you're an OEM or an EV startup, but you know what? It takes capital to get to production units, and it takes a belief from an OEM or a couple of major OEMs, and it looks like Hesai has all that stuff lined up. So good for them.
Yeah, and then they have this new greenfield manufacturing plant called Maxwell up and running later this year in Shanghai. They actually showed a kind of a scaled model at CES. Yeah, so I guess the takeaway is the thawing of this kind of the IPO climate. It's entirely different than what we've been talking about since that DD fiasco.
Yes, and but the DD stuff was more Chinese government than U.S. government, right? So
yeah,
I think we should mention that. So.
Okay, moving on. I didn't have as much headlines as last time, but I thought this episode really, we really talk about numbers, and numbers being, we can go into some of the price cuts. They keep coming, huh?
Keep coming, man.
They keep coming, right? They've been
but some of them are disguised, right? Some of them are The
I
sky is
tell
just
you,
price cuts.
Li Auto with that L7 Air, that was a sly move. That was a sly move.
Yeah,
Kind
let's
of a
just let's just call this price reduction a trim package.
yeah, yeah. So and announcing the new battery suppliers at the same time.
Yeah, I think they're just trying to create some leverage because they don't want to be too reliant on one supplier. But let's see if Sunwada and Esvolt can step up.
Yeah, and it's also interesting. The same day, pretty much the same day or the next day, the Leap Motor C11 launched the C11 EREV, and they just went up a step further. A EREV with a pure battery mode of nearly 300, pure battery mode range of nearly 300 kilometers. Right? I mean,
But so we should mention that they have a BEV version of the
yeah, yeah,
C11. So
yeah, which hasn't done well,
So
but
Leap Motor has been a bit of a roller coaster ride since its inception because in 2021 they started to kind of get out of the woods a little bit, and now we're seeing that they're struggling a bit more again. So
yeah, so they turn to dunking on Li Autos, LA and L9 on the W what on the energy efficiency of the EREV system, and then Li Auto pretty much dunked on Mercedes and BMW, basically GLE and X5 throughout their launch event, and
yeah,
which looked like an Apple
yeah.
product launch. I mean, it was
Well, with the Air Max or Air Pro
the
and
Pro,
Max,
right?
they effectively are borrowing from Apple. So, what do you think of the L7?
L7, when I was watching a little bit of the live stream, I was like, if I was in China, I have a daughter, it's the 3-person family, something I might consider,
It
right?
is a 5-seater, right?
Right?
And I wrote in my newsletter, and I need to look at my newsletter because I don't even remember what it's called. It is like those matryoshka Russian dolls,
Yeah, Russian doll. Yeah, right.
and they don't nestle into one another, but they they look almost identical. L7, L8, L9. So
Continuing, this family theme and even more toward this female, what this car is providing for female drivers or female passengers, right? The wives, right, of the family. I think that was key.
I think it's a good looking car. I just am perplexed with the amount of overlap on the pricing for the L7, L8, and L9, right? So there's definitely going to be some cannibalization, but yeah, it's this product planning. I think Liato still needs to get a bit more precise, and just for folks to understand the Air, which doesn't come with a CATL battery, it comes with either I think a Sunwada is about $47,000. It's probably about the size of an ES6.
Yeah, I think Li Xiang's got to figure it out. So he's going with his tactics, right? The L6, L5, right? They're all just going to look the same. But
I totally see the L7 edging out the G9 if I was a Chinese buyer, I'd probably lean into the L7 rather than the G9. So
yeah,
the Xpeng G9 is what I mean. So
yeah. But just these hits just coming, right? And I'm talking about the BZ4X. They couldn't hold it anymore, and it wasn't like they were selling.
They reduced by almost 25%, I think.
Yeah, so starting from 200,000 RMB, now they dropped it to by 30,000, right?
Yep.
And it's not like it's going to move the needle. I don't think it will.
No. Your window of opportunity to adjust in order to create more demand is so short and so small.
And a few hours after they announced the official price cut, Leap Motor came out with the C11 EREV, which starts at 159,800. How do you compete, right?
We've said this in past podcast, the sub 300,000 RMB, 45,000 US dollar categories, whether it's a small crossover, a sedan, a hatchback, it is a brutal, brutal market. And proof in the pudding is Toyota BZ, I don't even know what's called, BZ4,
BZ4X.
4X, and the Leap Motor C11. They're just getting no love. And Toyota spent hundreds of millions of dollars for that platform, right? So,
And it was a delayed launch. It was a
yes.
global recall before they even launched.
Well, we know that they kind of half-heartedly entered it anyways, right? So,
right. And now, again, with the BZ3, a lot is riding, right? A lot is riding on BYD,
yeah, I've been kind of chewing on those numbers, and BYD just so dominant. And I put some numbers together for legacy auto sales, and I believe they're all correct. I did some research because I had some work for a client, but tell me if I sound right or wrong. In 2014, Ford sold 1.1 million units in China. We're not talking EVs, we're just talking cars.
Everything, yeah.
In 2022, they sold 194,000. So in 7 years, they shrank by 82%. In GM in 2017, go ahead.
No, you just reminded me of the Jim Farley's what he said on the earnings call.
Yep.
He said they needed to get smaller and focus in China. That's a very diplomatic answer, I think. And then basically mentioning Geely and BYD, they're going to come to Europe, they're going to come to the US, right?
Ford is going to go through some drastic changes in the next 18 months, is what I'm being told. So it's specifically in Europe. So keep an eye out for that. But let me continue this. 2017, GM hit 4 million units, 4,040,000 units. In 2022, they're at 2.3 million. So that's a loss of almost 50%, right?
If everything goes according to plan, BYD should overtake everybody this year, not only in NEV sales, but everything.
Yes.
Beating Volkswagen, GM, right? Volkswagen did.
I'm glad you bring up Volkswagen, because in 2019, right before the pandemic,
it's over 4 million.
4.23 million vehicles sold.
Yeah.
2022, they're at 3.18 million. So they lost 1 million units of sales in 3 years.
Yeah, crazy.
So we always talk about how the legacy struggled recently in China. So I wanted to articulate that, right? Like quantify it for people, because I think it's really important to note that, what are they talking about? They still sell in the millions. Yes, they do sell in the millions, with the exception of Ford, GM, and Volkswagen, because it effectively becomes a two legacy automaker game at the volume level, right? Because the BMW and the Mercedes, they only have premium. They don't have that many brands, right?
And then GM with an asterisk, because half of their sales in China are Wulings.
Yes.
Plus Baojungs, maybe.
Yes. And right? We should also note that Geely sold 2.3 million cars in 2022.
Well, that's combining everybody.
Yes, combined everybody. Yeah, so just like GM and Volkswagen Group, right? So they are already up there. So to your point, Geely and BYD are poised to overtake the foreign legacies as the largest automakers in China. Full stop.
Yeah, it's something we can look forward to.
So I think their share loss is going to accelerate in the next few years. GM's going to be launching 10 cars by 2025, 4 this year, right? They're going to be launching another Cadillac, 2 Buicks, and a Chevrolet. So we'll see if those resonate in the market. But Ford, I don't know if Ford's launching anything. And Volkswagen, I don't believe they're going to be launching anything. So they're just kind of out there.
Yeah. And back to the price cuts, we debated last episode about Tesla dictating or not dictating the market. But look at all these price cuts. Had Tesla not announced that price cut right after the new year, right, in China, and then would we see these type of actions coming out of these companies? I don't know, but the dominoes just continue to fall.
Yes.
And just
Well,
blame Tesla, right? Blame Tesla on everything.
but it worked for Tesla, right? Because they got to 66,000 units.
Yeah, we can move into the January CPCA data. Surprisingly, I don't know whether you saw this. Wuling was really, really low in January.
I saw that.
They were not up there. I think CPCA showed they did 4,400 units. What happened?
That was a weird.
That was very weird. And in the CPCA's release of the January data, Wuling's nowhere to be seen. In the usual top five, they're usually number one right before or number two behind BYD and before Tesla.
Yeah.
They were nowhere to be seen. So I don't know what happened there. And I don't see much chatter on that.
And we know from last week that NIO was at around 8,500 units, right?
Yeah. So could be a one-time blip, but basically the January numbers are close to 50% off from the December highs. The penetration rates are still up there, are still above 25%. So, but the overall PV market prompted CPCA to say was in terms of year-on-year or month-on-month growth was the worst so far this century, the overall PV market. But again, I always put a big asterisk on that because we're not comparing apples to apples.
We're not.
Maybe we should compare, January with February sales of 2022. And then this month, February sales with January sales 2022 to have a better.
I think February sales this year will give us a much better indication of the health of the sectors. So
better, quote unquote, because again, not apples to apples.
A truer sense of the market, right?
Well, from NIO, they did another media roundtable, right? And President Li Hong, he said Q1, February will be good, but Q1 will still be tough. But later on in the year, should get better. So I'm not worried at all of the prospects.
I predicted that, maybe in my newsletter, but I predicted that if February sales are still not great, we could see something by April or May from a stimulus standpoint. So,
well, it's probably not going to go back to the December numbers. One, right? Second, all of these reasons, the pull ahead, the Chinese New Year, these people started migrating for the Chinese New Year. This is huge.
They normally do that a week before the New Year start, the actual New Year date.
And then the lingering effects of this mass COVID, what do you call it? Not outbreak, but
unleash.
Unleash, right? All of these factors, I think, had a huge effect on January sales. So February should be better.
I think that people were just genuinely happy and didn't think about buying, high value products and stuff like that. So
yeah, and I'm going to say this again. January says nothing about what's going to happen in 2023.
And you and I still talk to people every day. And I'm being told in Guangzhou, in Shenzhen, in Beijing, and in Shanghai, it's like nothing happened.
Right, it's all back to normal.
Yeah, energy levels are back to before. People are starting to come back into the office. There's still some masks being worn.
Yeah, I'm seeing more and more events where people are not masking. So
yeah,
like what's going on here.
There was an article in the U.S. Car and Driver that called out 5 Chinese EV companies to look out for. And I'm going to ask you, do you agree with all 5 that they called out?
No.
So you you read my newsletter, you read the article.
Hi-Fi, right, was one of them?
Yeah, Hi-Fi, XPeng, BYD, Geely, and what was the 5th one? Shoot.
Not NIO?
It was NIO, yes. It was NIO.
Yeah, BYD, Geely, NIO, XPeng.
Those are safe. Those are safe calls.
Hi-Fi is definitely a wild card.
Yes, yeah. And it's weird. Zeekr called their car an X. Now there's 3 X's. There's the Tesla Model X, there's the Hi-Fi X, and now the Zeekr X.
Probably a Y is coming out next.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
But Hi-Fi was strange to me because they're not selling in volume, even at the premium stuff, right? So
Hi-Fi, they haven't been as aggressive in announcing their delivery numbers. Remember those charts back a few months ago, right? They kept pushing out those posters with, we're beating the Porsche Taycan, and I don't see them anymore.
do you think that the price cuts from ABB, even on the ICE stuff, is helping them fend off Hi-Fi a little bit?
I don't know. I mean, they're not a volume.
They've never been a volume player, so
Right. So a few hundred units, 1,000 at most, I think, a month. It's already pretty good. But if you look at what happened to Lee Motor, going from 10,000 to 1,000, and if you were Hi-Fi, going from 800 to 100, it's a pretty steep drop.
this is where I'm pulling out that panic button, like, because those are like falling off a cliff reductions, right?
Your hand is hovering on that panic button.
if I'm Leap Motor Management, yes, of course.
But speaking of NIO, I think one number I wanted to mention, which I thought was very interesting, was Li Hong shared during the Chinese New Year break. I think it was January 13th or February 5th. Their battery, not swapping, but their battery chargers, 76% of the electricity charged were from other brands.
Brands, yeah.
Only 24% were from NIO vehicles. So from brands like BYD and Tesla. I thought that was very interesting. That this, you wouldn't see that from Tesla's superchargers, right?
Right.
And in fact, NIO is very proud of it. We're and then there's free battery swapping during the Chinese New Year, right? Li Hong was like, I was in Beijing and I saw these advertisements, outdoor advertisements. We don't spend the money there. We spend the money on giving free battery swaps during Chinese New Year. So, I mean, the way that these, these kind of war of words between the competitors is on another level.
Yeah, and one thing I should add is that NIO is hiring in the US. For the folks that are looking to move to San Jose, they're on board still to enter the US.
It's coming.
I think it's important to note that, that thawing is probably part of their calculus a little bit too, right? So
I mean, thawing, yes and no. No being what Biden said during the State of the Union, right? He was very confrontational on the balloon thing. So that's not going well there. But.
No, but I this is how I see it. China does this all the time. They got caught spying, and the U.S. spies. So let me qualify that. The U.S. spies. So I'm not saying the U.S. does not spy, but they got caught spying, and then they turned around and got offended because they got caught spying. So this is kind of the weird thing, right, about China sometimes that just kind of gets me a little bit. So yeah, man. Anything else that you wanted to talk to?
No, I think we talked about everything. L7 price cuts, Hesai IPO, January EV sales.
The one thing that I did mention in the newsletter that I wanted to get your take on is that Chinese customer satisfaction for NEVs is now higher, according to a survey. And you tell me, have you heard of this China Association for Quality? Are they a legit?
Well, maybe if you tell me the Chinese name,
exactly.
Yeah.
But they did a survey, and the survey said that there's higher satisfaction for NEV owners than there is for internal combustion engine owners. So
yeah, any of these survey, these bar charts that come out, let's say from JD Power, from any of these organizations, I treat them with a grain of salt. How independent is it? I don't know.
Right.
It presents one picture. We can reference it, but I wouldn't draw any major conclusions.
Sure.
From these studies. But not surprising, it's positive for the Chinese NEV brands, right?
The last thing that I wanted to say was, because we sometimes dunk on Tesla and stuff, but outside of China, they are still the king. And in California, they ended up number 1 and number 2 in vehicle sales for 2022, dethroning Toyota, the Toyota Camry, who is since I was a kid, seems always to be close to number one, right? It's not the number one car because that's normally the F-150, but it's normally the number one sedan sold in the United States. And California is a big reason for that. But the Model 3 and the Model Y this year, and we're talking versus ICEs too. So it's quite an accomplishment for Tesla to be able to say we dethroned Toyota, the ICE Toyota with two EVs, right? So
the premium market, I think they were number one as well.
yep. I also wanted to reference that Newsweek article where it said Michigan wants to be the next Silicon Valley. I think that's pretty cool that they've acknowledged that there's been investment in Michigan.
And that latest article on Ford and CATL.
Yes.
Worth a mention as well. It looks like it's moving gradually, ever so slowly to fruition, maybe.
Yes, I think they're working very delicately.
Yeah.
Because ultimately Ford is going to end up giving CATL cover fire to enter the US market to make battery cells.
Yeah.
So
I wanted to mention, since we're talking about Volkswagen, there's this news that came out. So Dr. Thomas Manfred Muller, the senior VP, I think he's in charge of Volkswagen Group China R&D, he visited Alton. And Alton is the battery swapping, independent battery swapping company. So could we look forward to something on the battery swapping side with Volkswagen? I don't know.
I think there's an opportunity. I do really think that they are kicking the tires on it. So
yeah, kicking the tires. That would be good. Yeah.
Oh, so one thing that I should mention is that, I'm walking down into my garage and Sasquatch sighting. I saw a Lucid Air. You don't see that many here in Michigan. So yeah, you don't. You see, Teslas are everywhere, but Lucids are still, you see more Rivians than you do Lucids. And so I actually like the car. I think it's nice. I think it's kind of a little too plain, but yes, it's a bit understated, but I don't know if I'd buy it for $120,000, but whatever.
Well, you do get $7,500 off on some of the models now.
Yes. I definitely need Abe's salary in order to even buy an $80,000, $90,000 version of it. So anyways, that's all I had, guys. Actually, I did have a chance to, and the reason that we had to push it out is because John McElroy invited me on his show. So I got to educate a few of his colleagues on what's going on in the China market. So it was a good conversation, and it's called Autoline After Hours. I think it'll post in the next week for those that are interested in catching it. And he did tell me that engagement was very high, because normally if people don't want to watch it, people start dropping off pretty quickly. So that's a little caveat for everyone. It's a pretty interesting show, so check it out.
Well, you're the perfect person to talk to, so yeah, not surprised.
And then next week, some housekeeping. Lei and I will be hosting a gaggle of panels and sitting on a gaggle of panels for our 2023 edition of Mobility Conference. It's a 3-day conference, February 14th, 15th, and 16th, that comprise of day 1 is going to be all about rare earth metals. Day 2 is going to be about policy. We have a panel on China policy, Europe policy,
I'll be on there.
And US policy. Yep. And then the last day, we're going to be talking about legacies, Tesla, and the China factor. So, and then I'll be sitting with Joe White and John McElroy talking about the US guys. So for those that are interested, I'll be posting links to how you can sign up for the live panels and ask questions and things like that. But if you want to get educated on global EV stuff, I think this is going to be the conference for you. So
great. Another double duty next Thursday, I think.
Yeah, so I'm going to be not sleeping that much. Remember last year, it was like...
Last year was a lot more content,
man.
I think.
Holy cow, yes. But yes, we decided to dial it down a little bit this year. But hey, thanks for joining us, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We will we will talk with you all next week.
Likewise. Bye-bye.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lei, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.